Everyone, welcome back to Will Small Engines. In today's video, we're finally going to be working on the Toro sportlawn, specifically adding the new rollers that I made. So right now, I'm just gonna dub over a couple pictures showing the process of me making these. So in the first picture, you can see that I cut the piece of wood that I got into the correct length with the miter saw. So the lawnmower itself only needs 3 rollers, but I had enough wood to make 4 for an extra, so I did that. In the second picture, you can see that I used the bandsaw to cut them into octagons because it's easier to cut or to lay the octagons than it is a square. It's just easier to lay like many smaller sides than it is sharp corners. It's a lot less rough on your arms with the chisel. And in the last picture, you can see that I lined up all 3 with the holes that are drilled in the center. So now let's go on to the repair. Okay, so here's the old ratty one. So this morning I bought a new axle because this one, as you can see, is pretty shot and yeah, it's just done. So I went to Home Depot and I bought this steel axle that fits inside of the new rollers. I also got some new washers in this bag that go in between the rollers. And I chose these 3 rollers because they line up the best on the axle and spin the smoothest. So now I'm going to cut the axle to length and assemble it on the lawnmower. Cut the new axle. I'm going to use this electric angle grinder, mostly because it's faster and it's more fun. But you could also use a hacksaw like this. This will work perfectly fine. It just might take a little bit longer. But if you do use the grinder, make sure that you wear eye protection and ear protection because angle grinders are loud and the sparks kind of go everywhere when you use it. So to mark the length for the new axle, which is behind here, I'm going to get the old axle and I'm going to mark the length of the old axle onto the new one, but I'm going to add a couple millimeters because over the 67 years that this lawnmower has been working, I'm pretty sure that the axle has shortened at least a little bit, so I want to add a couple millimeters just to make up for that shortness. And for the ends of the axle that I cut, I'm going to use this little flap disc on the angle grinder to smooth it out, to make sure it's nice and smooth and spins freely inside the holders. Alright, so I just cut the new axle with the angle grinder. Now what I'm going to do is assemble the axle with the rollers and the washers in between each one, so we can put it on the lawnmower. By the way, I'm using 1/2-inch hole washers. Stick that through there. And we'll get these guys on the ends. Alright, there we go. Now we can go ahead and put this on the lawnmower. Alright, so I was just trying to mock things up on the mower here. So I installed the axle partially into these holders, and I noticed that I made one of the rollers a little bit too long, so I can fit 2 full ones, and then I need to cut this one shorter so it fits in here. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'll turn you guys back on, and we'll get the rollers installed on the axle, and then we're going to install a new belt that I bought, which is over there, and then we might even, if we have time, install the cable for the clutch that I haven't hooked up yet. Alright, so now I have the smaller one cut and I've got it pretty much bolted in. Now all I have to do is adjust it to make sure that it doesn't wobble around like this anymore and it's all loose. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the bolts, and then we're going to install the new belt, and that should be the end of the video. And in the next video, we're going to install the new cable that I have up here because it needs to be connected to the clutch. So now I've got the rollers adjusted to a nice high setting and I have all the bolts nice and snug. So now what we're going to do is install the new belt. Alright, so to install the new belt, this particular machine requires you to lift to undo the bolts holding the motor to the frame. So you can go like this and slip the belt behind the clutch first, and then we need to get it around this big pulley here. And then if this belt is too long, I have a shorter one here, but there's adjuster slots in the frame, So if we need to, we can slide the engine back and forth to get the correct tension on the belt. So what we're going to do now is we're going to loosen up the 4 bolts holding this on so that we can get the belt around this pulley, and then we're going to adjust the belt to make sure it's a nice good tension. And there we go. All 4 bolts are loose. Now we can lift this up and get the belt behind it. Oh yeah, and there's also washers underneath this, so when you take it out, make sure you put the washer underneath the screw hole, or else this won't be the correct height off of the frame. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go snug up all 4 bolts holding this drive system on. And then after that, we can go tighten the belt and install the clutch the correct way. And maybe even if we have time, get the cable on. Alright, here we go, the last one. Here we go. Alright guys, so I've slid the motor to the maximum tension, or the maximum adjustment on with this belt, and it looks like it's too long. So I'm going to go ahead and swap out the smaller one, and then see if we can use that one. Alright guys, we have success with the small one. That's great. So now all we have to do is put the rest of the 4 bolts in this plate, and then put the motor bolts in and get it adjusted to the right tension. And then maybe we can even start it up and see if the blades work. But before we see if the blades work, we have to hook up the cable. Alright, now that we have the front engine bolts in, now we can go ahead and do the back. The ones in the back, like that one, are way more difficult than the ones in the front. So just keep that in mind if you do ever work on one of these old lawnmowers. Oh, and by the way, it's a 1/2 inch head and a 1/2 inch nut. And a 1/4 inch drive helps a lot on these tight spaces where a 3/8 or a 1/2 inch drive like that one over there can't get in. So what I'm doing is I'm holding this underneath the frame and holding this on top and just spinning this one to tighten it. Another trick I do, I forgot to tell you guys earlier, is I tape the washer to the nut like this, and then I can hold it with one hand and get the wrench on top and tighten the nut. Because when you're working on something like this, for example, when the bolt sticks through the chassis and it's hard to see underneath where everything is, it can be sometimes difficult to get the washer and the nut lined up on the actual bolt itself. So if you tape it together like this, you can just hold it and spin it with your fingers, and it's already perfectly going to be lined up. Alright, now we can do the most difficult bolt of them all, which is the bolt that holds on the cable to the engine right there. So how this works is this part sticks out like that, and the cable goes in between here. And then there's a bolt that goes through like that. And then there's a washer and a nut that goes in the bottom. And I think it's going to be difficult to get the cable in here, because we need to get this the right tension after we get this in and nice and snug. So for this one, you could use the same taping the washer to the nut trick as I previously mentioned. That would work pretty good for this. This is what it looks like when you tape the washer to the nut. Alright guys, so now that I have the bolt in, we can put the cable in the little holder down there, and then bring it to the proper tension and hook this wire to the clutch, which is way over here by my finger. So to put the cable into the little retainer thing, we need to get a slot screwdriver for this little nut or screw, and then lift the little thing up, put the cable in between the little clip and the flat thing, and then tighten the screw, and then it should be good. So I'll show you guys what it looks like when I'm done. And a little trick is, if it's difficult to get the cable on this while it's like this way, loosen the bolt a little bit and spin this towards you so it's easier. And then once you get the cable a little bit tight in the clamp, then you can rotate it how many ever degrees you need to get it, then you can rotate it to get it straight like this. That just makes it a lot easier than trying to get your fingers in behind the pulley and get the cable in. So this is how it should look when it's in there. And also, don't tighten it all the way, because you may need some slack in there to move the cable back and forth to get it to the proper tension for your application. Alright, so to get the cable onto the clutch thing right here, I might just loop it through the hole a bunch of times and put a screw to hold it tight so this can go back and forth and activate, or so we can engage and disengage the clutch. Alright, so I've got the cable pretty much on here, and now I think we're ready to go outside and test it out. Alright, so that concludes this video on the vintage Toro lawnmower. In the next video on this thing, it's going to be the finale, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to operate it, and like we're going to test it out on some stuff. So thank you for watching. See you next time.